Ayo, Greg Branos for the Coach Speak Index. What is good, everybody? I am here to break down the AFC South in part 2 of this 8-part series where we break down each division. Let's start with the Houston Texans, and let's talk about the quarterback, last year's Rookie of the Year, CJ Stroud. But actually, first, let's go back to November 6th of 2023. Something that D'Amico Ryans said that we just should have in the back of our minds. He said the run game isn't quite where we wanted it to be, but if it's not there, we still have a guy who can really throw it and make some plays. So if that's a strength of ours and we have to play to that, then that's what we'll do. And that is what we saw for the rest of 2023, like really relying on CJ Stroud because they were struggling in the run game, especially when Dameon Pierce was running the ball earlier in the season. Devin Singletary did fine enough, but Stroud was the one that really raised the level of that offense. And now they have Stephon Diggs, who they brought in alongside Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I have CJ Stroud as QB7. That is one spot behind consensus. Kyler Murray I have right above him, but it's super, super close. Really just depends on what kind of stacking, what kind of team I'm building there. If I'm doing an underdog best ball team. Let us go to running backs. Here's D'Amico Ryans on Joe Mixon, who they signed this offseason. I think he's going to open up the offense big time for us. I think with his style of play and how we want to get better running the football, I think Joe helps us in that regard. And then Ryans also mentioned that what sets Joe Mixon apart is his ability to be a game changer in the passing game. And he talked about him being available for checkdowns, but also for designed screens. And here's, offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick on Joe Mixon. He's just a really good running back in all regards. And it doesn't matter what run scheme you run. He's run zone schemes. He's run gap schemes. He's been used as a receiver. He's really done everything. D'Amico Ryans on Dameon Pierce. He has everything it takes to be a really good running back for us. And I think having him and Joe as a 1-2 punch will be very beneficial for us all. It's a small sample size that we have, but Ryans owns just a 60% reliability rating on Depth Chart Coach Speak. And one of the dings on his record has to do with last year's running back depth chart. Ryan said this on October 16th, 2023. Our run game was better. It was that complimentary back and forth between Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary. DP had some elite finishes. Motor had some nice runs. Going to continue to balance both guys out. Those two backs were balanced out the next game. Then Pierce missed the next 3 games with an injury, after which Devin Singletary dominated the backfield. Over the final 9 games of the season, including 2 playoff games, 156 opportunities for Devin Singletary versus just 44 for Dameon Pierce. Joe Mixon is my running back 13. That is 2 spots ahead of consensus. This offense is going to be in the red zone a lot this year. Scott Hansen, get ready. Mixon, by the way, is 30-1 to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns this year. That might be worth a taste over on Caesars. Dameon Pierce is my running back 59, 2 spots ahead of the market. That's really more possible contingent value if they were to move him somewhere. I know we wish cast a lot with running backs. Oh, what if Dameon Pierce goes to this team? What if Khalil Herbert goes to this team? Usually does not happen, but we can cross our fingers. We can hope. He had a real tough time in Bobby Slowick's outside zone running scheme, just 2.9 yards per carry last year after he averaged 4.3 yards per carry in 2022, his rookie season, before Slowick arrived. Got a little flyer for you here on their running back depth chart for the Texans. Jawar Jordan is my running back 65. That is 17 spots ahead of consensus. Worth a flyer, whether or not Dameon Pierce remains on this team. Jordan only ran a 4.56 40, but his game speed shows that this dude has some serious juice, and I could definitely see him excelling in Bobby Slowick's system. Let's hit the wide receivers. No real coach speak on the receivers here. This is easily the best wide receiver room in the NFL. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, all going in the first 3 rounds. On Underdog, Nico Collins is my wide receiver 15. That is 1 spot behind consensus. Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 21, 1 spot ahead of the market. And then Tank Dell is my wide receiver 23. That is 3 spots ahead of consensus. Just an incredible connection between Stroud and Tank Dell last year. Can't wait to see them in year 2. Tight end. Here's D'Amico Ryans on Brevin Jordan. He's improved. I see him. He's confident. He believes that he's a dude, and he can be for us, and he is, and I'm excited to see that confidence that Brevin is displaying throughout the OTAs. Ryan's also mentioned that he plays a highlight clip of Brevin Jordan every day during the offseason program, and the team just eats it up. Dalton Schultz is my tight end 14. That is 1 spot behind consensus. A lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and I hate Schultz's 11th round price tag. I would much rather pay up and redraft, take an elite tight end, than have Schultz be my tight end 1. If we're talking best ball, I'm just not paying that price to have Schultz as my tight end 2 when I can grab someone like Hunter Henry or Noah Fant or Jonnu Smith rounds later. They have just as good of a shot at producing similar numbers, and you're not getting bent over by the opportunity cost with them like you are with Schultz. Just too many high upside players in that 11th round range for me to be clicking on Dalton Schultz. Brevin Jordan is my tight end 34, which is somehow 30 spots ahead of consensus. If you're looking for a scroll down candidate at tight end, I guess he would qualify. I'm not sure if I'll have any shares in my portfolio, maybe 1, just to live a little. The Indianapolis Colts. We'll start with the quarterback. Anthony Richardson dealing with a couple things. Obviously the shoulder coming into this year from last year. On April 16th, Steichen said he's in a really good spot. Shoulder's feeling good. On June 6th, Richardson was dealing with some arm soreness, and Steichen said, rest assured, if we played on Sunday, he'd be starting. He just had some soreness in his arm, so we're just precautionary reasons, just held him out today. It's a small sample size, but Shane Steichen has a 65% reliability rating on Injury Coach Speak. I expect Richardson to be fine for the start of the season. Here's Steichen on the balance between utilizing Anthony Richardson's rushing talent and keeping the quarterback healthy. We need to go make plays, and sometimes making plays might be him running the football. Sometimes him making plays might be in the pocket. We'll work through those things, constantly working through those things, and we'll go from there. Anthony Richardson is my QB3 That is 2 spots ahead of consensus. He was QB1 last year in fantasy points per snap. Shane Steichen is an offensive maestro. We are going to see a fast pace of play. And I think we are going to see bully ball because this is a big, strong offense. Which brings me to Jonathan Taylor. We only got to see him and Richardson play together for 1/3 of a game last year. I really don't think people are ready for how good this duo is going to be because we didn't get a chance to see it last season. Indy has a terrific offensive line. Defenses are going to be in absolute hell trying to stop these two. And I get that Anthony Richardson siphons from Jonathan Taylor's touchdown ceiling in the red zone compared to Gardner Minshew. But Richardson will have them in the red zone more often than Minshew did. And even if the Colts don't dial back Richardson's running overall, I could see Steichen heavily leaning on Taylor near the goal line where defenses are so condensed. He's a phenomenal goal line back. Jonathan Taylor is my running back 5. That is even with the market. No holdout this year. He's fully healthy. I am in on Jonathan Taylor. Let's discuss the Colts wide receivers. Shane Steichen on Michael Pittman Jr., who left practice with a knee injury during OTAs. Said he just bumped knees out there on a play. I don't have a full update, but he should be fine. So Pittman should be a full go for training camp. We have a lot of quotes on A.D. Mitchell. We'll start with Steichen on what excites him about the rookie wide receiver. I think he's got a rare ability to separate at the top of routes. He's got an arsenal of releases versus press man. You can see it show up on tape. To get him where we got him, I couldn't be more fired up about it. Steichen also said that he really loves Mitchell's explosiveness, his size, and his hands. Steichen again on A.D. Mitchell. He's been making a ton of plays out here last couple days. Really good to see those one-on-one winners. So he's going to bring an element to our offense that we're really excited about. Colts offensive coordinator Jim Bob Cooter. Greatest name in the game. Here's what he had to say about A.D. Mitchell. He's dynamic. The guy gets open. Just the ability to separate, run some routes, a lot of different sort of routes at different depths, get open, make big catches. Steichen talked about the need for his wide receiver room to be selfless and said that 1 week, Michael Pittman may catch 10 passes, and A.D. Mitchell, Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs catch 3 or 4. And then the next week, it might flip to another guy. Steichen is basically daring you to take a Colts receiver in redraft leagues. Also, I don't love him invoking the name Alec Pierce. That name should be like Voldemort. We do not speak his name. Michael Pittman is my wide receiver 25, 1 spot behind consensus. A.D. Mitchell, my wide receiver 53, 4 spots ahead of the market there. And then Josh Downs, my wide receiver 58, which is also 4 spots ahead of consensus. All right, tight end. In March, Shane Steichen was asked about his history with bell cow tight ends with the Chargers and the Eagles, and if that's something that he would like to have. And what he said was really interesting. Steichen said, obviously, it helps, but we have a good group of tight ends right now. And then he ended his answer with this quote, I think it's a necessity, but I like the group that we have, and we go from there. At the owners' meeting, Steichen was asked again about the importance of tight ends, and this is what he answered. You look at the teams who have won a bunch of games, they have wide tight ends who line up in line and are excellent blockers. but they can also really exploit matchups against linebackers and safeties. Jelani Woods, by the way, is a Y tight end. And here is Shane Steichen on Jelani Woods. A big-bodied tight end that can run the vertical routes, run the shallows, run the deep cross. It's awesome to see. Obviously, he's a matchup for a defense that they gotta be prepared for. Given Shane Steichen's comments about bell cow tight ends, that he believes it's a necessity, but he likes the group that he has, I'm not sure that we see Jelani Woods in a bell cow role. If you have extra bench spots in your redraft league and you miss out on the elite tight ends, someone like Pat Freiermuth is your tight end one, maybe draft Jelani Woods in the final round in the case that he does lock down a full-time role. For best ball, I'm taking a good deal of him because he has huge upside. This guy scored a 10 on the relative athletic score. He's a massive 6'7", 253-pound dude who can run all those deep routes like Steichen talked about. I love taking him as my tight end 3 in a tight end build that looks something like Brock Bowers, Jonnu Smith, Jelani Woods. He is my tight end 21, which is 5 spots ahead of the market. The Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence is my QB 14. That is right in line with consensus. He's an aggressive thrower. That's what we want for fantasy. Doug Peterson stated that Jacksonville's run game needs to be much better so they can take some pressure off of Lawrence. This is a bad offensive line, which is very concerning for Lawrence, who got beat to hell last year. And it's also concerning for the run game, which they want to be much better. But I am not sure how much better it can be with this O-line. Let's talk about that running back room. Doug Peterson was asked at the Combine about Travis Etienne's 2024 workload after Etienne had the third most touches in the NFL last year, 325 touches. Peterson said, I would consider knocking a few of those reps down to keep him healthy throughout the course of the year. Peterson has a 70% reliability rating on usage and workload coach speak, which isn't great, but he has an impressive track record on running backs since 2017, including his coach speak on LeGarrette Blount in 2017, Josh Adams in 2018. There's a blast from the past. Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott in 2019, Miles Sanders in 2020, and Travis Etienne and JaMychal Hasty in 2022. Doug Peterson, again on Travis Etienne's workload in a different presser. It's hard to put necessarily a rep count on it, but you do want to keep him as healthy as you can throughout the season, and that's why we've talked about this too, as a staff and myself, making sure Tank Bigsby, gets opportunities to get out there and take some of the pounding off of Travis. So before Jacksonville's bye in 2023, Etienne played at least 80% of offensive snaps in 6 of 8 games. And he did not have an outing where he saw less than 71% of offensive snaps. And then after their bye week, there was not a single game where Etienne saw more than 78% of offensive snaps, and he only played more than 69% of offensive snaps in 2 of 9 games. So we already started seeing a reduction in his snaps in the second half of 2023, and I expect that trend to continue in 2024, where we'll see Etienne play a percentage of snaps in the high 60s, low 70s. Tank Bigsby should get one more chance at the RB2 spot, but if he flounders again, I imagine they'll be quick to turn to D'Ernest Johnson. Here's Doug Peterson on Tank Bigsby. We got to get Tank going. Bottom line, he's too good. That's why we drafted him. Doug Peterson again in another presser. Tank's done a great job going into year 2. He's a hard worker. He practices extremely fast, which I like. Eager to get the pads on and see what he can do. And then offensive coordinator Press Taylor said, I think Tank's in a great headspace in terms of where he goes into year 2, and we're looking to get the most out of him as well. Not usually a great situation when they're just commenting on the mental state that the player is in. Tank Bigsby was pretty bad last year, and that'd have to be such a huge reversal for him to actually look like the prospect that many of us thought he might be in the NFL. Travis Etienne is my running back 12. That is 2 spots behind the market. Tank Bigsby, my running back 70, 6 spots after consensus. D'Ernest Johnson, my running back 73, 17 spots ahead of the market. And Keelan Robinson, RB 75 for me. That is 15 spots ahead of consensus. That RB2 role is wide open, in my opinion, and they are all going either at the end of drafts or completely undrafted. So hitting on the right one could prove to be a huge value. And in the case of best ball drafts, maybe you want to take shots on guys like D'Ernest Johnson and Keelan Robinson, who are rarely being drafted, because that will give you a big edge over the field if those backs see significant usage. And then what happens if Etienne gets injured? The Jags' new RB1 will be a very low-owned running back, which is huge. Wide receiver, we have a couple quotes from offensive coordinator Press Taylor on rookie Brian Thomas Jr. First quote, you see, obviously, the intelligence and the quick twitch and the long speed show up. Football, I think, comes naturally to him, of just learning, picturing concepts, understanding routes, how we're attacking certain coverages. And then there's this quote that went viral for just being kind of weird. Press Taylor on Brian Thomas Jr. said, we're trying to get him to talk more, just ask more questions. He's not a big talker. For the most part, he just kind of nods and looks at you and then goes out on the field and does it right. I mean, that last part seems pretty important, that he's doing it right. Maybe they can get him to open up a little bit. Christian Kirk, wide receiver 30 for me, even with the market. Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie wallflower, is my wide receiver 41. That is 1 spot ahead of consensus. Gabe Davis, wide receiver 66, 3 spots behind the market. And Parker Washington is my wide receiver 96, 22 spots ahead of consensus. Nice little flyer there. They do like him a lot in Jacksonville. Tight end, Doug Peterson loves using tight ends in his offenses. We saw it with the Eagles. We've seen it with Evan Ingram in Jacksonville. 98 targets in 2022. And then 143 targets in 2023. That's a lot of targets. He is my tight end 8, which is where the market has him. The Tennessee Titans. I don't think there is any NFL offense that will experience a bigger philosophical change between last season and this season than the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry is gone. Mike Vrabel and his staff are gone. The run-centric days are over. New head coach Brian Callahan wants to slang that thing Dirk Diggler style. Here's Brian Callahan discussing his offensive vision at the Combine. When you're talking about good offenses in this league, the best ones throw the ball really well. And so we're trying to get to that point. He was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, where they threw at the league's second highest rate last season. They passed on 63.5% of plays. He has said several times that this Titans offense is going to look similar to what they ran in Cincy. So let's talk about the quarterback position real quick. Will Levis is the locked-in QB1. They like his progression thus far under this new regime. They've been working on Levis's pocket presence and other areas that he needed improvement on. I think he is in much better hands now than he was last year, and I really love his passing yardage prop on FanDuel. Over 3,375.5 passing yards. That is less than 200 passing yards per game for a quarterback who threw for 224 yards per game last season in his 8 full starts for the 9th run-heaviest team in the NFL, and he has 0 threats behind him on the depth chart. One of my favorite plays on the board. Will Levis is my quarterback 23. That is one spot ahead of consensus. This Titans offense is pretty cheap on Underdog. I love stacking Levis with his receivers and even with his running backs, which we'll get to in a second. Their fantasy playoff schedule beginning in week 15 goes Bengals, Colts, Jaguars. Shootout potential in all of those games. Stack them up like pancakes. And for you NFL preseason DFS sickos, Brian Callahan said that Mason Rudolph and Malik Willis will both get a fair shake at the QB2 job. They'll split reps pretty evenly. They'll get a chance to play quite a bit in the preseason. So file that away. All right, Titans wide receivers. Quite a bit of wide receiver talk from the Titans coaches this offseason. We will begin with Brian Callahan on how he'll deploy Calvin Ridley. You're looking at a very similar role that Jamar Chase, in terms of his ability to move around the formation. Use him in motion. He's got such a unique skill set. He's got great quickness. He's got great speed. He can run all the different routes. This is significant because the Jaguars didn't move Ridley around last year. And there's a real benefit to putting your playmakers in motion and moving them around to different spots where you can leverage the things that they do best. Callahan and the Titans front office recognized this, and that is why they went out and signed Calvin Ridley this offseason. Callahan also said that Calvin Ridley is everything that we thought he would be. And here's Callahan on Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. It's hard to cover both of them. We feel like no matter who we go line up against, that we're going to have someone that can go win. Offensive coordinator Nick Holtz on Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and DeAndre Hopkins. As a group, none of them have any real deficiency, but each one of them has kind of an elite trait which you really want to maximize. Tyler Boyd, by the way, has that wide receiver 3 position locked down, no doubt about it. And here's Brian Callahan on Boyd and Treylon Brooks. On Tyler Boyd, he said, everything about him is what we want to be about. And then Treylon Burks, Callahan said, he's going to play everything. He's going to play inside, he's going to play outside, and he's going to carve out a role for himself. Finally, Brian Callahan on Treylon Burks. Absolutely, he's going to have to contribute on special teams. There might be some more roles for him in the other phases as well, but anytime you're not the full-time starter, you're going to have to contribute somewhere on game day. AKA, Treylon Burks is buried. Calvin Ridley is my wide receiver 38. That is 3 spots behind consensus. DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 42, 1 spot behind the market. Tyler Boyd, my wide receiver 79, 8 spots ahead of consensus. Even though I'm behind the market just a tad on Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins, I'm still making a concerted effort to grab shares of these guys in best ball because I love the Tennessee stacks. Like I said, they're going to be throwing a ton this season. Running back, Brian Callahan in the owners meeting called Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears interchangeable. And this is something that we've been hearing a lot from both him and offensive coordinator Nick Holtz, who said, we see it 1A, 1B, and they're both just going to play a ton, get a lot of carries, and let them roll. Callahan also had this to say on Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. Anytime we can find ways to match those guys up in the passing game on linebackers, it's a huge benefit for us. They are hard to cover. They can run routes like receivers, which is unique. I've not seen guys like them very often, and we have 2 of them. I'm really excited about what those guys can bring to our offense. And then in another press conference, Callahan talked up Tyjae Spears' route running ability again, pointing out all the different ways you can get them the ball in the screen game and the passing game, which I take as yet another sign of how involved Spears will be in this offense. I see this as a 60-40 split in favor of Pollard, maybe 55-45. I believe they targeted Tony Pollard in free agency because he is so similar to Tyjae Spears in terms of skill sets, just like Sean McVay is doing in LA. You have a backfield where the running backs are almost duplicates of each other, so you're never tipping your hand to the defense when a particular guy is in the game. Tony Pollard is my running back 28. That is 1 spot ahead of the market. Tyjae Spears, my running back 32, which is 2 spots ahead of consensus. He's a big target for me. Tight end, Chigakonkwo, my tight end 28. That's 4 spots behind consensus. Mike Vrabel did not like this guy at all. A lot of red flags with him. I'll take him here and there in best ball if he drops far enough past ADP and he adds some correlation to my team. All right, that's going to do it for the AFC South. Our next podcast will cover the AFC North. Until then, I hope everyone has a good one. I'll see you here next time. Take us out, Sarah.